What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Bugonia, the latest movie by Yorgos Lanthimos, starring his now frequent collaborators Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons. The movie's in limited release right now with plans to expand to more theaters by next weekend. And over at the Village East by Angelica, where I saw it, they were handing out these little frames of film to promote the fact that they were projecting the movie today on 35 millimeter. I don't know how many theaters are going to project it in 35 millimeter, but more on that format in a second. But I should add that this is an English language remake of a 2003 South Korean movie called Save the Green Planet, but I have not seen it because until a few minutes ago, I was unaware of its existence. In any case, I don't want to bury my opinion behind 10 paragraphs of nonsensical introduction. I'll come out right and say it. Bugonia reminded me of the pleasure of being wrong, because I went into the movie with some preconceived notions about the movie, none of which turned out to be true. And I went into it kind of expecting to be annoyed. Like, I love Yorgos Lanthimos' movies, but the trailer I'd seen and the clips I'd seen struck a very strange tone where it felt a little bit like it was going to be one of those movies where it was striving for some very narrow, very specific, dark comedic tone that only like 5 or 10 people find to be hilarious, but the rest of us are left scratching our heads. And initially, as the movie got underway, it appeared to confirm my premature feelings toward the movie. And I'd already started writing its obituary in my head saying, oh, well, I love Yorgos Lanthimos and I love movies like Alps and Dogtooth, etc. But what a shame this movie doesn't quite live up to his earlier work. But by the end of the movie, I was completely and totally dumbstruck. I was enthralled. I was just absolutely loving the movie. But here's the tricky part. I can't tell you why without totally destroying all the surprises that the movie contains. And I'm sure the surprises are already out there because it's played at a bunch of festivals like Venice and Telluride and that sort of thing. And part of me worries that even by mentioning my total 180 on the movie, that I might be depriving some other people of precisely the same joy I felt as the movie started to take some pretty surprising twists and turns, where basically I was feeling the cinematic equivalent of total whiplash, where the movie managed to confound all my expectations every step of the way. And maybe by the end of this video, I might not be able to resist divulging some details on that front, but I'll give you a verbal warning as well as a time code below if I do. But let's get some of the basics out of the way first. Here is the synopsis as written over on Wikipedia. A conspiracy theory-obsessed beekeeper and his cousin kidnap the high-powered CEO of a major company and shave her head as they are convinced she is an alien intent on destroying the planet Earth.
Where's my hair?
Your hair has been destroyed to prevent you from contacting your ship.
And as you'll see in the trailer, if you watch the trailer, the reason she's covered in all that white glop, actually, you know what? I can't quite remember why they cover her in all that white glop. They shave her head because her hair allows her to communicate with aliens and so on and so forth. But in any case, I couldn't resist covering myself with some similar white glop for my thumbnail, but it quickly got in my eyes and got gross, so I had to wash it off before continuing with this video. But speaking of the trailer, I don't think it's doing the best job of luring people in and getting people excited about Bugonia, because this is coming from somebody who has seen every single movie ever directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, where I wouldn't say I sit around obsessing over his career and watching his movies 4, 5, 6 times, but he is a director that I really enjoy, and his collaboration with Emma Stone over the last few movies has been very exciting, because Emma Stone, if she had wished to, she could have stayed over at Disney making Cruella sequels until the end of time, probably making like $50 million every time, and just, lived in the lap of luxury until whenever her franchise was inevitably run into the ground by the powers that be at Disney. But instead, she decided to put her money in the bank and go off and make a series of basically art house films and dark absurdist comedies with Yorgos Lanthimos. I still feel like the best collaboration between the two of them was Poor Things, but she's really fucking good in Bugonia. So much so that around like the halfway or 2/3 mark, I was thinking to myself, is Emma Stone the best young actress of her generation, or the best young movie star of her generation? And I'm always changing my mind, whether it's Margaret Qualley or Qualley. I don't even know how to pronounce her last name. I'm always going back and forth because I always get it wrong. But there are a bunch of great young actresses out there. But Emma Stone, she has an appetite for risk that I really respond to, where not all these experiments with Yorgos Lanthimos are always going to completely and totally pay off. But she's putting her star power and her reputation on the line. And I think the future is going to be very kind to this series of collaborations between these two filmmakers. In any case, getting back to the trailer.
There is no possible scenario where you benefit from this incident.
That was really good. My pulse is racing right now.
It's hard to market a movie that has a ton of surprises without giving away those surprises. But at the same time, like, how do you lure people in with like the appropriate bait where they get totally fired up, where you kind of sell the tone and the spirit of the movie while telling them nothing? It's an art form unto itself, and very few people get it right. So I'm just going to do the best that I can to tell people, like, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Like, like if you did not like the trailer or don't like some of the clips floating around, but you have enjoyed Yorgos Lanthimos' movies in the past, whether that's, The Lobster or whatever the case might be, then trust your heart and trust your impulses, because this is one of the good ones in his career. And when I look back on the last 15, 16 years of Yorgos Lanthimos' career, it's incredible just how prolific he's been, where we've had Bugonia and Kinds of Kindness and Poor Things and a bunch of short films and short videos, but also The Favorite, Killing of a Sacred Deer, The Lobster, Alps, Dogtooth. You know what? There's one last feature by him that I've not yet seen, Canetta from 2005. I didn't even know it existed. Or actually, there's another one, My Best Friend from 2001. For anybody out there who's been following his career for a long time, what is your opinion of the early days of Yorgos Lanthimos? Because I just mistakenly assumed that when Dogtooth exploded and put him on the world stage, that was the beginning of his career. But yeah, there are a few chapters to his career before that. But getting back to Bugonia and ultimately why I find it to be so successful, I think a lot of that credit's got to go to screenwriter Will Tracy. And once again, I've not seen Save the Green Planet, so I don't know how much he is basically borrowing from that South Korean movie and bringing forward into this movie. But due to the topical kind of contemporary nature of a lot of the complaints and grievances expressed by Jesse Plemons' character, I'm assuming a lot of the material in the movie is original, or at least a fresh coat of paint on old topics, because the first half of the movie, or the first third of the movie, is basically a series of debates between Jesse Plemons' character Teddy and Emma Stone's character Michelle, whom he has kidnapped. Well, Jesse's also got his cousin Don, played by Aidan Delbus, but to put it charitably, Don is he's a little simple, and he's a little slow, and he's a rather pitiful figure in a lot of ways. But basically the two of them kidnap this incredibly powerful CEO, trap her in the basement, shave her head, cover her in all that white goo, and basically start demanding that she help them essentially negotiate the departure of an alien race or species that they believe is dominating the earth and ruining it, and basically through technology and a bunch of other means, slowly but surely ending the human race. And Emma Stone's like, Jesus fucking Christ, like, what do I need to say or do to get out of here without getting my head blown off or my scalp torn off or whatever the case might be? Because we learned early on that Jesse Plemons, his character, he's not just kind of a lovable knucklehead who likes to play with his bees and occasionally embraces a few conspiracy theories, but he is capable of some really twisted, sadistic, fucked up shit. Like, oh, okay, you're not the soft and cuddly conspiracy theorist. You're a legitimately dangerous person. But Emma Stone's character, she's got her own flaws, because while she's a wildly successful CEO, she's also got just like a heart of stone, and she's kind of evil to the core, and she both embraces and criticizes a lot of the doublespeak and kind of management speak that a lot of very corporate people tend to embrace, where everything's insincere, everything's inauthentic, and she pushes back on a little bit of that corporate culture. But anytime she tries to push back on this kind of horrible, toxic corporate culture they've embraced, then she'll immediately kind of cave and then surrender right back over to it, as we see in the clip when she discusses the 5:30 departure time for her employees.
No one is going to be overworked like in the past. No more unpleasant incidents. But, of course, it's not compulsory. And obviously, if people still have work to do, they should absolutely stay and continue to work.
But going into the movie, my biggest mistaken assumption about it beforehand, which turned out to be totally false, I thought basically the entire movie was just going to be Emma Stone kind of browbeating Jesse Plemons' character and pointing out all the areas where he's ignorant or paranoid or conspiratorial, and then kind of slowly put him in his place, and then ultimately be freed, which would have been a very boring movie. Thank God that's not the movie they shot. That's not the movie they wrote. That's not the movie they performed. Like, everything I expected about this movie was wrong, but I'm going to blame some of that on the trailer, and the rest of it's all just my own, personal bias and baggage, etc. and so forth. But as I said before in the beginning of the video, I love being wrong when a movie is just stark raving nuts in the best possible way, where it's insanely violent and really disgusting at times and really genuinely, sincerely disturbing, but also still maintains this kind of absurdist dark comedy thing going on. And part of the joy of the movie is watching all the various tactics that Emma Stone's character employs, trying to talk her way out of this. Sometimes she tries to be intimidating, sometimes she tries to be reasonable, sometimes she tries to be empathetic, she tries every tactic under the sun. But what makes the movie increasingly interesting as it goes is that we have a series of debates between Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons' character on a variety of subjects, like take the gradual extinction of the bees, for instance. He's a beekeeper, so he's very invested in that topic and very knowledgeable. We see how he's incredibly bright and incredibly well informed in some areas, But in other areas, he's definitely guilty of whatever echo chamber that she perceives him to be a part of. However, as he acknowledges over the course of the movie, he's experimented with a variety of echo chambers and a variety of what they call them, like positive feedback loops, where he already knows what argument she's going to make against his various points of view because he's been in her camp on several occasions. Once again, he's kind of gone shopping for a variety of ideologies, and so he's very familiar with both the tactics and the arguments as well as the belief systems of several different groups. And that's really fun to watch because on one hand, while it's very easy to dislike the character wielding a shotgun and kidnapping women against their will, on the other hand, it's interesting seeing how anytime she tries to make assumptions about who he is or what he might believe, he's a few steps ahead of her because, once again, he's experimented with a variety of points of view before finally landing on this worldview that seems a little bit extreme from an outsider's perspective looking in. But let me pause for a moment in discussing the plot because it's around the halfway mark where this movie starts to take some incredibly delightful and dark and surprising twists and turns that I was just leaning back in my chair with my hands behind my head, just having a blast. But let's talk a little bit about the marketing gimmick of projecting this movie on film and handing out frames of film ahead of time, because there is a part of me that's very nostalgic for the era of film, because under the right circumstances, it creates a tactile experience that you don't get from digital formats, where you know there's a projectionist out there looking after you, adjusting the focus between reels and so on and so forth, where the projectionist and the audience in the movie, because the movie is actually a physical thing on film, you're just having a very different experience from pressing a button and watching a streaming service at home. But a few minutes into this movie, it was still out of focus, and I just, like I used to back in the old days, just shouted, "Focus!" like really, really loud from the front row, and I completely, totally pissed off my audience over the Village East by Angelica, and they were shushing me and they thought I was the world's biggest prick. However, a few seconds later, whoop, 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 they made a little adjustment, and they put the film back in focus, because back in the 1990s, anytime I went to a crummy, like Regal Theater or whatever the case might be, I would say 9 out of 10 times I had to go complain and tell the people working at the theater to focus the movie, because back then you would have like 12 movies playing side by side, and usually like one 15-year-old teenager with like milkshake stains all over their shirt that was responsible for keeping each movie in focus. And unless you bitched and complained, they just wouldn't know if the movie is playing out of focus. And I think a lot of people, they just don't know, like, why does it look funny? It's like, yeah, because you have to focus the film. Like, whether you're shooting it or projecting it, you must focus it. And I won't claim to know all the ins and outs of film projection, but I do know when it's in focus and when it's not. I might be old, but I'm not completely and totally blind. In any case, it was a reminder that while I'm very nostalgic about film in the past, sometimes it is nice where you don't have to worry about that being yet another concern when you go to the movies. Like, it's enough to worry about, people talking or being on their phones, or this one guy today who just kept like doing these vomit burps beside me. I wanted to say, dude, you're revolting, like, please leave the theater. But he did it several times throughout the movie. I was like, I could probably taste it if I were to sitting like 1 or 2 seats closer to you. But there are a variety of things that can destroy a good movie-going experience. But luckily, the film projection was at least in the booth, so he could hear me when I was complaining. But on the other hand, the flip side is when the audience is on their best behavior and you have a great projectionist and you have a good movie, like when the stars are aligned, that is a very special experience. So I admired the fact that they were projecting the film on film, but maybe sometimes it's more trouble than it's worth, because you can probably count on 2 hands right now how many good projectionists there are, like across the entire country. And a lot of them probably live in New York, because we have a couple theaters that, are hell-bent upon showing movies in 70 millimeter and that sort of thing. But it is a job that requires technical skill. And if like the film breaks, do they know how to splice reels together? I think a lot of that skill base has sadly been lost. But getting back to the subject of Bugonia, and I keep wanting to say Stankonia. If you've never heard the album Stankonia, I highly recommend it. It's an album by Outkast from like 25 years ago, and you might be thinking to yourself, aren't you a little white to be listening to Stankonia? Well, I'll just say that I contain multitudes, but Bugonia, what can I say without giving anything away? The ending is one that's so rare and so special. Let's say this. It has the potential to be equally satisfying to a variety of different audience members who have diametrically opposed points of view. Let's say, for instance, that you are one of these Jesse Plemons characters who's a flat earther and a conspiracy theorist and living off the grid and trapped within a very, very small echo chamber. There's going to be part of the ending where you're like, see, like, I told you, like, I was right, and they're going to enjoy that. But let's say hypothetically that you're some out of touch billionaire who speaks in doublespeak and is totally inauthentic and is constantly, dropping in like the word diversity in every single sentence, even if every aspect of your life has nothing to do with diversity. You just know that it's a trendy, popular thing to say in corporate culture right now. But like, basically the kind of loathsome individual that Emma Stone is playing so well in this movie, where she's just leaning into the corporate hypocrisy. I think there are going to be some of those people who, when they see this movie, are like, see, told you, like my worldview is being reinforced and it's correct. And I realize I'm being very vague and non-committal, but it's very, very rare these days, at least, to see a movie that's not ideologically alienating to a great majority of people, where this movie somehow, I won't say that it's equally fair to all people, but maybe it's equally cruel to all people. And that's what I really responded to, where it's not choosing sides in political debates or ideological debates or scientific debates. It's basically choosing sides against most of humanity and all of its flaws and weaknesses and shortcomings, but doing so in violent comedic fashion. And that was very refreshing, because I went into this movie just expecting to be kind of annoyed. And also, I don't like seeing a movie by a director that I admire where I have to kind of say, oh, if you like this director, like, check out The Favorite and check out Poor Things and check out these other movies, but maybe this is not going to be the movie for you. I think if you're patient with Bugonia and you go into it with an open mind, by the end of it, you'll be convinced that it's one of Yorgos Lanthimos' best movies. But I think what impressed me most about the ending of the movie is that I felt an immediate and irresistible compulsion to go back and watch the movie from the beginning to see what clues are provided along the way that might potentially kind of show where the movie's leading. Because once again, if you go into a movie with your mind more or less already made up about what is the movie that you're going to see, well, then you can overlook a lot of interesting qualities along the way. So I am fired up to see Bugonia for a second time. And once again, my hat's off to Emma Stone for taking this unusual approach to her career, because she could have just as easily been working as like a big studio Disney princess until the end of her days, and then slowly graduated into like evil queen roles and made piles and piles of money. But instead, I think she reached a certain point where she was like, you know what? I've made piles of cash. Now I want to create a few movies that'll last. And obviously, not every big swing is going to pay off, and not every big swing is going to turn into an enduring classic that people want to revisit. But you don't get to make those enduring classics unless you take 10 or 15 big swings and then hope to the movie gods, maybe one or two of them will work out. Because over the last few years, between Bugonia and Eddington for Ari Aster, Kinds of Kindness with Yorgos Lanthimos, the TV show The Curse, Poor Things with Yorgos Lanthimos, like, I feel like everything going back to basically for the last like 3 or 4 years, there've been a lot of big swings. And if you go back to 2021, that's where she made Cruella, where I think she realized, oh shit, I've got more money than I know what to do with. Now it's time to have some fun and make some cool flicks.
Every time. What is it?
Skills and identities.
To foster a new generation of, okay, let's go again.
And I would love to know what Emma Stone's agent and manager have said about her behind closed doors. Because on one hand, you obviously have to be very proud when somebody gets nominated for and wins a ton of awards. On the other hand, as an agent and a manager, and you're getting your little piece of the pie, your percentage of the action, well, then it's much more fun to be that person's agent when they're making Cruella as opposed to Bugonia. But who knows? Maybe Bugonia will make a bunch of money. And every once in a while, these art house movies do perform pretty well. Like Poor Things made over $100 million worldwide. I think a lot of people overlook the fact that while it was an art house success, it was just an art house success that enjoyed worldwide acclaim. But I'm sure in their private moments, Emma Stone's management team is regretting the day that she ever made The Favorite with Yorgos Lanthimos, which was the beginning of their association back in 2018. Because before that, she was making movies like La La Land, which I think made like $400 million. And she was making movies like Zombieland, Double Tap. And let's not forget that she played Gwen Stacy in The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I mean, for a long time, she was a full-blown mainstream actress. But obviously, she had some qualities in her that needed to be expressed. And she had the good fortune of hitching her wagon to Yorgos Lanthimos. And I feel like every actress out there needs to have that opportunity where you find just a complete and total maniac with whom you can make several movies that will really flesh out your career. You know, someone like Katharine Hepburn, she had George Cukor, who fleshed out her career. Diane Keaton had Woody Allen, who fleshed out her career. Like, there's every once in a while, you'll get these actress-director combos where they do their best work when they're working together. Because as beloved as Yorgos Lanthimos' early Greek language movies like Dogtooth might have been, if you have a movie star in your movie and your movie's in English, well, it just makes it much more commercially viable and easier to market around the world. These are just the realities of the movie industry. But at this point, I've been talking quite a while, or not talking about Bugonia for quite a while, without giving away the ending. So I'm thinking I'm going to avoid having a spoiler-light territory and just trying to preserve that experience for anybody who's curious but unconvinced. But what I can tease is that if you have a taste for the rough stuff, and if you have a taste for the unpredictable and the truly absurd, twists and turns that you'll find completely and totally disturbing, but at the same time, strangely delightful in some ways, and then there'll be other twists and turns that are consciousness expanding, where it's just always a lot of fun when you're second guessing all the things that you felt along the way. Because if you write reviews or do video reviews or do podcasts about movies, sometimes when you're watching a movie, you'll start to kind of write your review as you're going, like, all right, remember to say this, remember to say that. And you'll see some people writing down their points. And once you start committing to a particular narrative, then it's sometimes it can be difficult to shake that rough draft you've already got going in your head, and you realize, oh shit, I need to throw that rough draft out and start over completely. So I just feel a huge debt of gratitude to Yorgos Lanthimos, who once again proved to me I am often wrong, but never in doubt. So on that note, I think I'm going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed my point of view, or lack thereof, so to speak. I feel like this is one of those reviews where I try to tease everything but say nothing. But if you are a fan of Yorgos Lanthimos' movies, well then allow yourself to get excited. This is one of the good ones. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell. But I hope everyone has an amazing weekend at the movies, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.